O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
Can artificial intelligence, or can machines in general, become sentient? And so I want to attack this from a few different points of view. The first one being theological, and how we would understand sentience, consciousness, self-awareness from a theological perspective. But then I want to introduce you guys to the philosophical discussion. I've talked about this before in what's called the hard problem in the field of the philosophy of mind, or the mind-body problem. And this is the explanation of what consciousness is. And so, as many people might speculate that, oh yeah, it's kind of inevitable that AI is going to become conscious. Well, if that's so, what exactly is consciousness? And as you'll see by the end of this opening monologue, there is no concrete answer to that question. And this is part of the problem with the philosophy of mind as a field. Not that there aren't philosophers out there doing great work, there are, but it's kind of stagnated in its ability because they thought they were going to sort of uncover the structures of the brain, which they've done great leaps in. Again, look at Neuralink, look at the research we did with Dr. Jose Delgado in regards to brain implants and stimulation of different brain centers. But they thought this was going to lead to a full understanding of what consciousness is. However, it has not. And it's yielded multiple different theories, which I'm just going to give you guys an introduction to all these different theories in regards to the philosophy of mind. So you can see it's not as easy as you thought it was at all. So to begin, can it be sentient? Coming from a theological perspective, the answer is obviously no. Well, why would, from a theological perspective, why would you say that artificial intelligence, once it has a larger data set to pull from, once it's connected more information, more dots together, well, what makes you say that it can't become sentient or conscious? And from a theological perspective, it has to do with us being made in the image of God. So sentience from a Christian perspective comes from, and we'll speak specifically from an Orthodox perspective, because when you look at some of the conversations in regards to Protestant Christian philosophers, they delve a little bit more deeply into the presuppositions of the scientific world, not all of them, but some. And so from an Orthodox perspective, given our anthropology, no machine can become sentient because no machine has a soul. And so we've talked about this before, about the Aristotelian concept that the soul actually gives form to the body. This is a philosophy called hylomorphism, and is still a philosophy in the philosophy of mind that has fallen out of favor, but many Catholic philosophers in this field still promote hylomorphism, the idea that the soul is what gives form to the body and gives us access to our sort of noetic faculties. Now, in the Western Catholic doctrine, they don't have exactly the same thing that we have in regards to a body, soul, and nous. And so speaking from an Orthodox perspective here, the nous, your noetic faculties, your ability to think, your ability to imagine, your ability to reflect, these are higher level faculties that are tied with the existence of a soul. And these attributes are what distinctively separate us from the animal kingdom. It's not that the lion out in the Sahara isn't alive, or to some degree isn't self-aware. It is. Obviously, there's a spectrum here. But when we're talking about, and I'll highlight the question of what does it mean to be sentient, at no point in this discussion do we argue that the AI will become sentient to the level of an animal or an apex predator or a dog. No, they're talking about becoming and usurping the abilities of humans themselves. And so from a theological perspective, it begs the question, the machine can't have a soul, so how could it have access to these noetic higher faculties? And that's why we would argue, no matter how advanced the AI gets, it's never going to become conscious, sentient in the same sense that you and I are. So the soul, the imago Dei, the higher faculties, being able to participate in these uncreated energies, this is what separates us from machines at a distinctive level. Now, at the same time, we know that we're not the only ones, the only created beings that participate in noetic faculties. And a la angels and demons, we do believe that there are noetic entities that exist that are not necessarily within space and time. This is a whole different conversation in regards to demonic influence into our world and how they try to access and become embodied through us, i.e., demonic possession, spiritual warfare, logismy in the imagination. They try to manipulate us, right, from a theological perspective to get back at God. The devil, Satan is so lowly, it can't actually fight with God. And so what he does is he tries to bring us, a privileged creation made in the image of God. God became a man, not an angel, so that man can participate through grace in divinity. That these noetic entities are trying to exert influence within space and time so they can drag us to the same destination that they have, which is an eternal separation from God. And so as I say that, obviously from a theological perspective, I just said machines cannot become sentient. However, the next question is, could Satan utilize AI or machines for himself? And this is where we have to keep that possibility open. I've talked about this before. This is my own speculation, and I've seen other people have kind of picked up on this, not because of me or anything. It just must be a meme going around. I doubt they ever watched this YouTube channel, but I've talked about how, imagine, again, AI developed in another decade or so, way more powerful than it is now, still not sentient because it has no soul. However, noetic entities, i.e., Satan or demons, could inhabit it, could utilize it for their own intensive purposes, because technology not having a will is not evil in and of itself, even though we can see deteriorating processes like I've highlighted with the atrophy of humanity, the ability to read, the ability to talk, the ability to read a map, all these skill sets, reading an analog clock. I saw something that Gen Z, that many high schools and schools have had to put in digital clocks because the children cannot read a normal clock with seconds hands, minutes hands, hours hands, this type of thing. So that's really scary. And so we see this atrophy in humanity regarding our abilities to do certain things because we're sort of exporting these things into the machine. Doesn't mean technology is evil in and of itself. Obviously, we're having this transmission and conversation through technology. But technology, from a theological perspective, is made in the image of fallen man, right? And so this has led to a distinctive understanding of the eschaton and soteriology in regards, and teleology in regards to Christian worldviews, where we have the progressive bent that believes in a millenarian utopia, that technology is giving us the attributes that Adam lost due to the fall. And then the other side, which is apocalyptic, that's seeing that despite being an ebb and flow and certain good things and bad things, that ultimately we're moving in the wrong direction. That certainly we have, flat screen TVs and refrigeration, but are we better people? Obviously, from a Christian perspective, the argument is no. And so there is no real progress here. Surely there's aspects of material progress, yes, but progress at a historic level, progress as a species themselves, hard to say that that's the case. So, yeah. So analog clocks, Jolbert says DPH can't read an analog clock, confirmed. So, anyways, this losing of our abilities, this atrophying of capabilities, I think is obviously indicative of the growth of technology. And you could say in somewhat is demonic, but technology itself is not. And so the possibility that fallen entities could inhabit these machines, I would say that's a real possibility. And in a way, it's the inversion of the incarnation, because Satan is not omnipotent and he's not omnipresent, but with a ultimate AI, one, again, imagine 10 more years of development, one that's connected, let's say it is the epitome, it is the sine qua non of AI systems. Imagine then a fallen entity inhabiting the machine to some degree and utilizing it as an inverted incarnation to attain the ability to be everywhere at once on the planet, the ability to know everything that's going on, the ability to track your every movement through your smartphone or through your Fitbit, knowing exactly your blood pressure and your heart rate, all this different stuff. That is a real possibility. But again, is the AI sentient? No. Now we come to the next question, looking at this not as a theological perspective, but from a philosophical level. What does it mean to be sentient? And as I highlighted, at no point in this conversation, when you look at the academic literature promoting the sentience of AI, do they argue that it's going to be at the same level of an animal. It's usurping human capabilities. And so, what is consciousness then, or what does it mean to be sentient? And so often we associate sentience and self-awareness, to the point that you and I enjoy it, as a form of consciousness, or we are self-conscious is how it's often described. But the hard problem in the body, in the mind-body problem, or the hard problem in the philosophy of mind, can't even define what consciousness is at any consistent level. And so this is where many people have associated consciousness with aspects of problem solving, and sort of reducing consciousness to IQ, the recognitions of patterns and problem solving. But this brings into a question, which we're going to look at, the famous analytic philosopher John Searle. And John Searle highlights that with his famous thought experiment, the Chinese room, which I'm going to play. It's like 5 minutes of him actually explaining the theory of the Chinese room, which he put forth back in the 80s, saying that no AI system would be able to become sentient because it's just doing computation. It's not the same thing as intelligence. It's not the same thing as consciousness. And this is, you can see why Yuval Noah Harari then, in his book Homo Deus, he's promising you and I are going to become like gods. It's based on the idea of dataism, that data and the processing and sifting of data is, quote unquote, what it means to be sentient and conscious. And therefore, you and I sift data. You and I are what he calls biological algorithms. And therefore, an actual algorithm in an AI is no different. It's just a different scale of being able to process data. But that then redefines intelligence as computation again, being able to computate based on data inputs and outputs. And so the philosophy of mind itself has been stagnant for decades, because the problem of consciousness. And so, does consciousness have a substance? This is a fundamental problem, again, within the philosophy of mind, because many people of the physicalist school, who argue that consciousness or sentience or self-awareness is due to the emergent phenomenon, they would say, yeah, consciousness has no substance. Where the dualists, you can a la Descartes in his substance dualism, that there is a sort of metaphysical substance of consciousness, of thought, and then there's a substance of matter, and these things are separate. We talked about Mormonism last week, and Mormons being substance monists, because they then collapse this distinction between consciousness and matter. And it's because of their weird worldview, where they believe matter is eternal itself, which is a contradiction, and God then is eternally creating, yada, yada, yada. But then their worldview, because of this, aligns itself with the promotion of transhumanism, as we highlighted. So, does consciousness have a substance? Well, we're going to look at a few dualist theories, because there's more than one. And one that has really grown in prominence in the last, let's say, decade to 2 decades, and is very popular in the spiritual communities, is what's called panpsychism, which argues, yes, there is a substance to consciousness, and it pervades all things, and therefore all things, including matter, are conscious to some degree. This is a panpsychic worldview. This is a very popular one that's been put forward. And so some of the problems then with consciousness, this is why, if we even ask what consciousness is, there's 3 fundamental problems that the philosophy of mind has yet been able to answer. One is what's called the descriptive problem. What is consciousness? Can you even describe what exactly it is? And schools vary. So not really. There is no consensus on what consciousness is. The other hard problem is the explanatory problem. How did consciousness, assuming we came up with a definition of what it is, how did it come to exist? How did it come about, especially within a paradigm of the Big Bang and material evolution, Darwinian theory, all this different stuff? Nobody can explain how consciousness even came to existence. Again, this is where you get these sort of emergent theories. And then the third problem that they haven't even been able to answer is the functional. if we did answer what consciousness is and we did give an explanation for where it came from, the third problem is, why does it exist at all? And of course, without any sort of transcendent telos, you're going to be hard pressed to find why the material, dumb, meaningless world would come to the proliferation of consciousness, especially within our own species. And then people argue, like Joe Rogan, that we then are like a caterpillar that's leading into becoming a new butterfly, right? Well, if that's the case, why would a material universe even produce consciousness in the first place? And of course, it doesn't make sense that it would. So those are the three major problems with the definition of consciousness itself: is the descriptive, the explanatory, and the functional. And so when we look at the conversation with John Vervaeke, Jonathan Pageau, and there's a couple other gentlemen today, keep this in mind, because I think this is one that is not pushed enough on people, especially in the technology field, that promote this idea of sentient AI, is what the hell is sentience is, and how do you know? Of course, they don't. And so here's a few theories that I want to highlight to you guys, again, regarding this. Just as just a very quick introduction to some of these theories of consciousness. And so I love using this. If you haven't used this data bank, if you're interested in philosophy and you're looking at sort of what is the state of the question in regards to academic understandings, utilize this site. I know it's stanford.edu, but they have great, let me see, it's the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They do have great information here. So going back down to theories of consciousness, we can look at the dualist theories. This is what, again, I highlighted. This comes into questioning whether consciousness has a substance. And so dualist theories regard at least some aspects of consciousness falling outside the realm of the physical, but specific forms of dualism differ in which aspects those are. So we have substance dualism, such as traditional Cartesian dualism asserts the existence of both physical and non-physical substances. Such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds. So again, this would at least keep open. I'm not saying that we promote substance dualism. As Orthodox Christians, we do have a difference between matter and consciousness or sentience. Because how could we if we believe in angels and demons? These are noetic entities that can participate in these higher faculties, and yet they're not physical. So we do have a separation. And of course, in regards to anthropology, we have a kind of hylomorphism. So such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds or selves or entities in which consciousness inheres. Though substance dualism is at present largely out of favor, it does have some contemporary proponents. Then we have property dualism, and its several versions enjoys a greater level of current support. All such theories assert the existence of conscious properties that are either identical are neither identical nor reducible to physical properties, but which may nonetheless be instantiated by the very same things that instantiate physical properties. In that respect, they may be classified as dual aspect theories. They take some parts of reality, organism brains, neural states, and neural processes to instantiate properties of two distinct or disjoint sorts. Okay. So therefore, matter and consciousness are not the same thing, but in a way, they are dependent on each other. It's a form of property dualism. Fundamental property dualism regards consciousness and mental properties as basic constituents of reality on par with fundamental physical properties, such as electromagnetic charge. They may interact in causal and law-like ways with other fundamental properties, such as those of physics, but ontologically, their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative of any other properties. Okay. This is emergent property dualism, treats conscious properties as arising from complex organizations of physical constituents, but as doing so in a radical way, that the emergent result is something over and above its physical causes and is not an a priori predictable nor explicable in terms of their strictly physical natures. The coherence of such emergent views has been challenged, but they have supporters. Then we have the neutral monist property dualism, treats both conscious and mental properties as physical properties, and in some way dependent upon and derivative from a more basic level of reality that in itself is neither mental nor physical. However, if one takes dualism to be a claim about there being two distinct realms of fundamental entities or properties, then perhaps neutral monism should be classified as a version of property dualism. And then this is the one that I said has been gaining a lot of steam, somewhat in regards to the academy, but certainly more popularly in regards to people who look into this topic, is panpsychism. And so Thomas Nagel is the famous philosopher in regards to the philosophy of mind, who has I think he's also written on cosmology and stuff like that. But Nagel has been the one to really lead the charge in the promotion of panpsychism. And it might be regarded as a fourth type of property dualism in that it regards all constituents of reality as having some psychic or at least some proto-psychic properties distinct from whatever physical properties they may have, meaning consciousness pervades the entire universe and everything physical in the universe has some level of consciousness. That's panpsychism. So you can see how that would fit with a very new age worldview. Now you have the physicalist theories. So you have the dualist theories and then you have the physicalist theories. And both those categories break into many different groups. So in regards to the physicalist theories, we have the eliminativist theories, reductively deny the existence of consciousness, or at least the existence of some of its commonly accepted sorts of features. So this one just rejects the idea that consciousness actually exists. Then we can go down here to identity theory. This is a very popular one. At least a strict psychophysical type identity theory offers another strongly reductive option by identifying conscious mental property states and processes with physical ones, most typically a neural or neurophysiological nature. If having a qualitative conscious experience or phenomenal read just as being in a braid state with the relevant neurophysiological properties, then such experimental properties are real, but their reality is a straightforwardly physical reality. So the color red is real, but it's real because your brain recognizes it. It has no metaphysical unity, right? It has no metaphysical universal properties, so to speak. Type identity theory is so called because it identifies mental and physical types or properties on par with identifying the property of being water with the property of being composed of H2O molecules. So this is, again, a type of emergent theory that we've talked about. After a brief period of popularity in the early days of contemporary physicalism during the 1950s and 60s, a la think of Skinner and behaviorism, it has been far less widely held because of problems such as multiple realization objection, according to which mental properties are more abstract and thus capable of being realized by many diverse underlying structural or chemical substrates. If one on the same conscious property can be realized by different neurophysiological properties in different organisms, then the two properties cannot be strictly identical. And then we come down to the functionalist definitions, and that's the last one. We have the non-reductive physicalism and the functionalist. Functionalist theories in particular rely heavily on the notion of realization to explicate the relation between consciousness and the physical. According to functionalism, a state of process counts as being of a given mental or conscious type in virtue of the functional role it plays within a suitably organized system. A given physical state realizes relevant conscious mental type by placing the appropriate role within the larger physical system it contains. The functionalist often appeals to analogies with other interlevel relations, such as between the biological and the biochemical, or the chemical and the atomic. In each case, properties or facts at one level are realized by complex interactions between items at an underlying level. And so obviously it has its critics. And then we have the non-reductive physicalism of this sort denies that the theoretical or conceptual resources appropriate or adequate for dealing with the facts at the level of underlying substrate or realization must be adequate as for dealing with those that at the realized level. As noted above in the response to how question, one can believe that all economic facts are physically realized without thinking that resources of the physical sciences provide cognitive or conceptual tools we need for doing economics. Okay. So with that being said, now you have an idea of all the theories. These are the theories of consciousness in regards to the philosophy of mind. now I want to bring to you one of the most prominent, arguably the most popular or famous living philosopher right now, which is John Searle. And I've met him, and I actually took a class on him. And John Searle actually was in the room when he actually gave the presentation on the Chinese room, because I took a class back when I was in Berkeley on it was mind body, and then it was person and neuroscience. So it was two classes related to these topics, and in one of them John Searle would come as a guest lecturer. And so I was able to hear his definitive rejection of why AI will never be sentient. And so we're talking about hard AI, by the way, not soft AI, hard AI, the real promise of like a sentient God. And so here is him. This is all the way back in 1984, laying out a regard to another scholar who's in favor of like hard AI, and him laying out his argument of the Chinese room in regards to the difference between computation and intelligence. And so I want to lay this out, and just this will be the last thing before we get into the conversation between Jonathan Pageau and John Vervaeke. So let's just check this out real quick, and then you'll get an understanding of maybe why some of the distinctions in this argument. It can get very tricky, but why an AI system can be incredibly computational, but that never means it's going to be conscious or sentient or truly intelligent. So check this out.
John Searle, you have strong views on the subject of artificial intelligence, and I think those views focus on one argument.
Yeah.
And it's something about a Chinese room.
Well, let me tell you a little bit.
I wonder if you would tell me what it aims to prove, and then tell me what it is.
Okay. I like to talk about particular programs and the sort of thing that's coming. So let's take
critical battery, please charge.
The Yale Artificial Intelligence Lab for Understanding Stories. That's understanding it in quotes. The way it works is this. You give the computer a story, and these tend to be rather simple-minded stories. Here's a story. Man went into a restaurant and ordered a hamburger. When they brought him the hamburger, it was burned to a crisp. So the man stormed out of the restaurant without paying the bill. Now you ask the computer, did the man eat the hamburger? And lo and behold, the computer says, no, he didn't eat the hamburger. Now, that's an interesting result because you remember it didn't say in the story whether or not the guy ate the hamburger.
One up for the computer.
One up for the computer. Okay, now, and that's presumably doing something we could do. This is passing the test that we would expect a child to pass for understanding the story. Okay, how does it work? Well, the computer has in its data bank, in addition to the story, it's got a representation of how things go on in restaurants called a restaurant script. And it matches the story and the question against the restaurant script before it gives the answer. Now, what are we to make of this? Well, what I call the strong AI people, and I'm really not sure Maggie is one of them, but the people who are sort of...
And that's what I meant, strong versus weak AI, not hard versus soft. It's strong AI versus weak AI. I apologize for that misphrasing.
The gung-ho fanatics in AI say, this proves that the computer literally understands the story. Now, I think I can demonstrate conclusively that it proves no such thing, and in fact, that the computer doesn't understand the story.
Is that understanding without inverted?
No quotes here.
No kind of funny
honest to John understanding. Right. I mean, and to their credit, a lot of people in AI insist that we are using these words in their literal sense. Simon and Newell say the understanding we attribute to the computer is the same understanding we attribute to human beings. Okay, what I ask you to imagine is this. I like to do it in the first person and have everybody do it from their own point of view. Imagine I'm locked in a room, and I got a huge box full of Chinese symbols. I don't know any Chinese, just so many squiggle signs to me. Then they bring in another box full of Chinese symbols, and they give me a bunch of rules in English for matching these symbols. So it says, take a squiggle sign out of box number 1 and go and put it next to a squaggle sign out of box number 2. Just to jump ahead a second, that's called a computational rule over formally specified elements. Okay, now let's suppose they give me in another little batch of Chinese symbols together with some more rules.
You can see the lady who is promoting strong AI. You can see her, oh my gosh, does this guy just shut up?
In English for shuffling these symbols around, only this time I give them back, the chaps who were giving me all this stuff through the window, I give them back some Chinese symbols. So here I am in my room with my 3 bunches of Chinese symbols. I'm shuffling symbols around, symbols are coming in, and I'm shuffling them back out. Now imagine, unknown to me, the guy who gave
critical battery, please charge.
Script. The second box they call a story about a restaurant. The third bunch of symbols they call questions about the story. The rules in English they call the program. The answer, the stuff that I give them back through the window, they call answers to the questions about the story. And me, they call the computer. Now, let's suppose that after a while, they get so good at writing the program, and I get so good at shuffling symbols, that my answers to the questions are indistinguishable from native Chinese speakers. So the story comes in, I don't know what it means, it's a bunch of symbols. But the question follows, did the guy in the restaurant eat the egg foo young? And I give back the symbol that means, no, the guy didn't eat the egg foo young. Now, I passed the test for understanding the story, but I don't understand a word of Chinese.
I think that is the Turing test.
That's so-called.
Can you say a word about that?
Well, Alan Turing, a great British mathematical genius, invented the test for determining whether or not we should attribute understanding to the computer, and the test was, could the computer fool an expert? So let's suppose that I can fool the experts. My answers to the questions are as good as those of native Chinese speakers. Imagine they even give me a question of the form, do you understand Chinese? And I give them back answers that mean in Chinese, of course I understand Chinese. Why do you guys keep asking me these stupid questions? Can't you see I'm passing the Turing test? Now, here's the punchline. This is the point of the whole analysis. I do not understand a word of Chinese. And if I don't understand Chinese in this example, neither does any computer, because the computer has exactly what I have. The computer has that and nothing more. It has a set of formal rules for manipulating symbols. It takes symbols as input, it manipulates the symbols, it gives symbols as output. And if I don't understand Chinese, which I obviously don't, there's no way any other digital computer could understand Chinese or anything else, because all it has is uninterpreted formal symbols. Or just to put this again in one last sentence, and that is, what the computer has, and Maggie described this very well with the programs, is a syntax and not a semantics. What it's got is a set of formal rules for manipulating uninterpreted formal symbols. But what human beings have is not just a bunch of symbols. We know what the symbols mean. You give me a story in English, and I know what it means.